I'm going to work you through sort of the whole adult-based language today. So how does the adult communicate? How do we get someone else into adult? How do we deal with the critical parent, the nurturing parent, the angry child, the withdrawn child, and the spontaneous? They're all a little bit different. In other words, have we been paying attention to ego states? Have we sort of noticed my own sort of communication style in different scenarios? Were you hooked by different ego states? So we said the most common transaction is parent to child, right? The goal is to get someone to the adult. That's the ultimate place we want to get someone to in a conversation. And again, it's not swiftly navigating and manipulating them into adult. The idea behind this is certain people get there easier and then others it takes a lot longer, right? If I've got this angry child, nurturing parent is the one ego state that helps deflate this child and give access to the adult. And the reason for that is the angry child literally feels hurt. And that's the joke we make about the angry child, is the angry child is screaming for help, screaming for attention, screaming to be heard, screaming for significance. We also recognize that all the built-up emotion of the angry child, right, has to come out. It's impossible to keep in. And the nurturing parent isn't to give permission for toxic behavior. This isn't if you've got someone who's reacting badly, you're like, whoa, that's okay, let me hold you. But it's really around, I hear you, I see you, I understand you, your emotions are normal, your reaction is normal, I felt this way, it's empathy. And it's with that understanding that helps deflate, and then we can start to bring in that adult. Remember, the parental ego state, what it does is it's a guiding type of behavior. So I'm trying to guide outcome, I'm trying to guide the conversation, I'm trying to guide the decision. Some of us have been on the receiving end of that sort of parent ego state, sometimes positive, negative, but the negative one, they're guiding us and we feel that direction from them as well. Even though you got the best advice, they're not in the position to receive it. Golf is the best example, right? Your buddy comes up and they see you hit the ball and they're like, let me give you some advice. The whole concept of today is preparation and planning. Plan your work, work your plan. Plan your communication, work your communication. A wonderful saying, failing to plan is planning to fail. And that whole concept of winging it. Do you know where winging it comes from? You know what winging it is? What's winging it? Being impulsive, doing it in the moment, standing and giving a presentation just spontaneously. This might have happened to you. Someone says, oh, you're doing an event. Sean, give us a little speech right now, right? And you get up and you wing it a little bit, right? So the term winging it actually comes from the days of the theater, where there was a understudy, a main actor or actress. Back in the day, you never knew whether they were going to show up. They were quite inconsistent. So you would always have an understudy, a backup, that would be ready to step in and take over at any moment. So if there was an actor or actress that didn't show up, they fell off the stage, they got too drunk, they disappeared, who knew? The other actor or actress, the backup, would be able to step in and continue the play. And the saying goes, the show must go on. Where these backups would wait is they would wait in the wings of the theater. Now, the truth to this is, in order for them to be a backup, they had to plan, rehearse, practice, right? They had to run the scripts, sometimes even more than the main actor or actress, because they had to be so ready to jump in at any point. So the term winging it actually has more to do with preparation than it does doing it spontaneously. I think there are certain personalities that need that structure. Right? I think it's not a one-size-fits-all. How do we figure out who we're dealing with here? Like, does this person need this type of structure, this follow-up, this accountability, this direction? Usually the spontaneous childs do. They're great maybe on the floor, and they're great with people and stuff, but they tend to leave mess everywhere. They don't follow up. They're not consistent. They let things slip through the crack. They're not following the process. So what we say is, don't forget to follow the process. And they go, yeah. And then next thing you know, they're bouncy balls again, right? So this is where we go from zero to hero. So what we want to do is a stopover. So instead of going from zero to why the hell aren't you following the process, we want to kind of do a stopover at, all right, let's kind of examine what's the objective, who's in front of me right now, what's the communication. Here's what's really important about communication. We talk about adult to adult. Sometimes there's certain ego states that have to stop over first in order to connect the voice to the person. Right? Simply put, maybe this person didn't take what you were saying seriously. It was an option. So maybe more of that sort of critical parent steps up. However, the adult is the thing that's going to allow us to figure this out. And some of those questions we might want to ask is, hey, considering this list, can you walk me through what your plan is to get her done? What's your timelines look like for this week? What else do you have on your list right now? Can we check in on Wednesday? How's it going with the list? Oh, fuck, you haven't started it yet? Tell me more about that. What have you been focusing on this week? Right? We get there, but we get there by transferring responsibility. And the whole idea behind doing this is if I do this work up front with people, it's going to make my communication with them in the future easier. As I say, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're not going to, learn how to take these things on all at once. In fact, what we might have to acknowledge is that this type of exercise has as much to do with unlearning as it does learning. Like sort of unlearning, letting go of some of those previous communication habits. All right, quick reminder. All right, when it comes down to communication, how much do we retain from what we hear? We retain 20% from what we hear. So if we're doing all the talking and all the telling and all the directing and all the guiding, we're giving the person an opportunity to take in about 20%. Listen, I'm a big list guy. I'm a guy that writes things down, and in absence of doing that, like, I tend to forget, right? In fact, Kwame knows him. His name is Rob. He was the other video guy. Rob would come in and we would shoot all day, and you know, you're doing all these takes and you're doing all these moments, and in the moment there's little things that happen. It'll be like, all right, yeah, like that was a good moment, or like, you know, don't forget to log this. And then we would get back to the editing and it would be like, you know, couldn't find it, right? I'd be like, Rob, you need to write this shit down. Like, yeah, I got it in my head, man. I got it in my head. Anyway, fast forward, we eventually got him the purple booklet, and we said, you don't walk into a shoot without that and a pen. And as we're sort of going through things, you're going to write down those time codes. So when we sit down at the editing suite, we can go straight to the time code and get it done, right? We retain 30% from what we see. Thereafter, we're getting about 50. We retain 90% from what we say and what we do. So the writing down is an important aspect, but from a communication standpoint, getting people to actively participate, that's why we use the adult to adult, is where they're going to retain a lot more out of that interaction. When people communicate, these are called transactions. Little Johnny's sitting in a park eating a big bag of candy, pounding this bag of candy down. All right, he's about 10 years old. Gummy bears, gummy worms, Jolly Ranchers, Skittles. He's got one of those candy necklaces. All right, this kid is he's just gorging himself with candy. And as he's sitting down eating this big bag of candy, this old man who goes to the park every single day, sits in nature, walks in the park, feeds the ducks, notices this 10-year-old kid eating a big bag of candy. And then he looks around, sees no parents, decides to get involved. Walks over and says, hey, kid, don't you know eating all that candy is bad for you? It's bad for your teeth, your stomach. You shouldn't be eating all that candy. In fact, you should throw that bag of candy right away, and you should take your ass home. Young Johnny paused for a moment. He looked up at the old man and said, hey, old man, you know my grandfather lived until he was 106 years old. Old man said, really? Did he eat as much candy as you? Young Johnny paused for a moment and said, nope, but he learned how to mind his fucking own business. Picked up his bag of candy and walked away. And that was the transaction story of parent to child. So, old man represented the critical parent. Directive, telling, forceful, authoritative rules. Johnny eating the big bag of candy represented the spontaneous child. Free, boundless, carefree, no rules, no responsibility, big bag of candy. And when the old man spoke to the kid, he spoke to him like a child. He said, hey, listen, kid, don't you know, finger wagging, you should, you shouldn't, this is the rules. Spoke to him like a child. And then how did Johnny respond? Like a child. He didn't respond as a spontaneous, he responded as an angry child. Okay, so let's continue the interaction. Old man says, do you speak to your mother with that kind of mouth? He says, no, but I'd speak to your mother with that kind of mouth. Now, parent to child, child to parent, parent to child, child to parent. What happens next? So this is predictable. All right, we could see what's going to happen. Good chance that this old man is going to end up getting hooked as the angry child. He says, listen, you little effing kid. I will beat you like your parents never beat you. And then next thing you know, we've got angry child to angry child. Now sometimes, remember, we did the dinner table one, right? We're sitting down for dinner. Carrie's at the other end of the table. I put salt on everything. I go, Carrie, why the hell is the salt all the way down at the other end of the table? Carrie responds with, F you, I didn't set up the damn table. Right? Go get your own salt. What'd you say to me, Carrie? Right? I now got an angry child. Right? I run over, I try to grab the salt, he grabs the salt. Next thing you know, we're in a physical altercation over the salt. And that began with the critical parent question, which is why? Why the hell is the salt all the way at the other end of the table? Now, the predictable transaction says I address that ego state responds. But any ego state that I end up exchanging with, if I keep exchanging with that ego state, it's predictable. People respond as treated. Now, there's the unexpected transaction, which we said, this is when you don't respond as treated. This is when you're able to break that line into adult to adult. Do you remember the American Airlines story? Flying back from Washington, trying to check in for the flight, panicked. Line's not moving. I run into the person at the front, the gate agent, the person at the counter, I should say. She's like a sloth. I say hello, reaching out for this nurturing parent, because that's the normal thing you would do in a sort of customer sort of setting. I'm trying to check in for the flight. Check in on the kiosk. Now I make the next famous mistake where I try to explain to her what the situation is. Ma'am, we've already tried the kiosk. Listen, your lips are moving, your ears ain't working. I told you to check in on the kiosk. And the story continues that she didn't realize that she's got a raging, angry child sitting in front of her that's about to burst. And thank God I had my good old colleague there, his name was Jared, looked at me and said, Greg, adult to adult, people respond as treated. I'm begging you, please don't do it. I go, fine, Jared. Ma'am, if I told you I've tried the kiosk and I can't find my reservation code, how do you suggest I check in for the Toronto flight? There was the transaction, the one question that broke the parent-to-child interaction, because even though I was hooked and pinched and I wanted to react, the objective became very clear, which was to get on the plane. That becomes my anchor in the moment. As an angry child, critical parent personality, a couple of you are, what do you do in the moment? The first thing you do is you say, what's my objective? Because if not, the ability for you to pound on them, to hit them, to control them, to squeeze them, comes out a lot more naturally. Okay? And the more we squeeze, the more they back up. The harder I push, the more withdrawn child they become. And then the worst thing about that is, and remember this, you start the interaction with them and you put them into child, and by the time you leave the interaction, you've left them in child. So I walk away, they're left in withdrawn child, their ability to now go execute on whatever my demand, my command, my authority, my direction, my tell was, is now disrupted. And as a critical parent, I will come back and find fault. Why haven't you moved fast enough? And I should be able to go, oh, I know why, because that became with me. So the unexpected transaction is you do not respond as treated. You're able to create a new transaction, which becomes adult to adult.